Imagine Europe. Now imagine Europe in 1939. What do you see? Everything feels unstable, as if history itself is about to collapse into something darker and more violent. In this atmosphere, Weston Hugh Auden writes a poem of just 6 lines, Epitaph on a Tyrant. At first, the title sounds almost respectful. An epitaph is what you write for the dead. But Auden is not praising anyone here. The poem begins with a word, perfection, that already feels suspicious, because perfection usually sounds absolute, final, clean. But that small phrase of a kind changes everything. Perfection here is something limiting and limited, sharper, controlled, almost militarized. It lacks that harmony we usually associate with beauty, and it no longer looks human. This is an engineered perfection, built on symmetry, obedience, and power. Then the poem shifts, and the poetry invented was easy to understand. At first, this sounds almost positive. Simplicity, clarity, accessibility are what seems to distinguish this line. But that's exactly where the irony sits, because easy to understand here does not mean enlightenment, it means reduction. Everything complex is removed, ambiguity disappears. And that's how a dictatorship works. It reduces reality into something clean, repetitive, and emotionally controllable through language and propaganda. Then we get to one of the most unsettling lines. He knew human folly like the back of his hand. It sounds like confidence, familiarity, control. The question is, about what? And here comes the theme of human folly. Because the tyrant understands people extremely well, their fears, their vanity, their need to belong, their tendency towards conformism. And this is exactly why the previous line matters so much. The poetry invented was easy to understand, because the language of the tyrant did not need complexity. It did not speak to the mind, but to the gut and the heart, to instinct, emotion, and insecurity. But Auden's irony here is subtle. This knowledge is not wisdom nor understanding, but assumption. It is not empathy, it is cynicism. The tyrant understands humanity not in order to elevate it, but in order to manipulate it more efficiently. But let's have a look at the next line. He was greatly interested in armies and fleets. The verse is deliberately euphemistic and absolutely detached. Auden does not describe the tyrant as bloodthirsty. Instead, he reduces militarism to a simple interest, almost as if armies and fleets were harmless hobbies. The irony is devastating. Behind this euphemistic, almost bureaucratic tone lies the reality of organized violence. Armies and fleets symbolize the machinery of domination and the power to enforce obedience through fear. Then we see something even more unsettling. When he laughed, respectable senators burst with laughter. This is not laughter. It is reaction, and it is performance. Even the so-called respectable figures lose autonomy in the presence of absolute power. They don't respond to humor, they respond to hierarchy. And what looks like social harmony is actually obedience disguised as participation. And then the poem breaks open, and when he cried, the little children died in the streets. This line suddenly destroys the cold distance of the poem and reveals its human cost. There is no metaphor left to hide behind. The tyrant's emotional state, something private, internal, produces real consequences in the outside world. And those consequences fall on the most vulnerable, children. In this poem, Auden avoids emotional outbursts and revolutionary slogans. Instead, he uses the brief and satirical style of an epitaph to expose the terrifying banality of tyranny. In only a few lines, he creates a universal portrait of authoritarian power. Childish, manipulative, and violent, all concealed beneath a facade of order. Because Auden reminds us that power is most dangerous not when it appears monstrous, but when it appears rational, even respectable. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, subscribe to my channel.